So welcome to the show, Dave.
I'm excited to be here and happy to talk about podcasting.
Absolutely. So, guys, it's really weird. Dave and I, we're actually both in the Philippines at the moment. We're both just down the road from each other. So it's so good to finally see a face who is someone who I can actually catch up with face to face that has podcasting. So, Dave, tell us about you've been podcasting for what, 8 years or so now with through Podcast Engineers?
So podcast engineers is a service provider, right? So we do help with the podcast production side of things for other podcasters. But I do have my own personal podcast that we started. It's kind of on a break right now, but it's we started it back in 2017. But
Wow.
now, yeah, with editing and revolving about podcasting in general, I've been around for quite a while, 8 years. So that's and counting, right? It's going, it's not leaving, right? It's
Well,
still here.
I've got to say, you would have been one of the early adopters because podcasting as a industry, for use of a better word, like
Mm.
back 8 years ago, I imagine that it would have been a lot of trial and error. There wasn't all this, media and Google searches that you could do back then to find out all the information. So I imagine it's been an interesting process seeing it evolve.
Yeah. I've been with this podcast. So I've edited this podcast in the US and they've been around, I started back in 2013. So it's around that. I was still learning about how it all works. I didn't know about the world of a podcast. I think I just know like two other shows back then.
Yeah, yeah.
But here's the thing, like this podcast, this industry has been growing a lot, and we've seen that last year. Basically, we've seen a lot of people coming in and deals coming in, like Joe Rogan getting exclusive deals with Spotify, and and advertisers are already recognizing it as a staple for marketing and putting their brands out there.
Absolutely. Like it's been really interesting. A lot of the businesses that we work with where podcasting was this kind of side hustle, kind of fun to do type project on the side, then all of a sudden that's starting to shift, and podcasting is now becoming their major tool in terms of attracting new clients, and they're almost moving away from their traditional business to podcasting, which is pretty cool to see. Good for people like you and I who love
Yeah,
podcasting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Dave, tell me, like quite often we rely on people like you, sound engineers, to go and work your magic and spend endless hours to just get that podcast quality as crisp and clear as it can be. But let's face it, there's also steps that can be taken at the outset before we actually press the record button that make our lives so much easier from an editing perspective. And and not everybody has a studio to be able to record in. And when I say the word studio, I kind of use it lightly because let's face it, for many of us, it's just finding an empty corner in the house somewhere where we can, and particularly with the whole COVID, like move kids over from homeschooling and saying, this is my space now. So when it was setting up and looking at creating our own studio, and with a lot of podcasting, you don't want to go out and spend a fortune at the start because you're not sure what you need. So, what are some tips, or how would you advise someone to set up a podcast studio or a room if it's in their own house?
Yeah, so just to put it out there, by the way, Daniel, there are studios out there that offer this. I think in Manila, in the Philippines specifically, but in the US, there's a lot of them, and in Australia, I believe, where you can just go book the place. They have their studio, they have their microphones, and you can have the best quality podcast that you could. The thing is, it's logistics wise, it's not ideal because you have to go there and record on the spot on that place. So uh funny you should ask because people now are doing this. It's that's the standard is recording podcasts through the internet and doing it online. So The best part is to just set up your place and find a good location, basically. But it all boils down to understanding how audio recording works. And there are a lot of engineers out there. I'm lucky to be part of or have a background in music and hanging out with audio engineers who actually produce this music and work in a studio. So that played a little bit of factor of how I'm able to understand. Okay, this is how mic works. Uh, so understanding that the microphone is the key here, and if you have a decent microphone, a lot of people buy this microphone called the Blue Yeti. But the thing with that microphone is it's a condenser microphone. It captures everything, like all the sound in the room. So
Mm.
I would always suggest going for an easy to go with microphone, which is a dynamic microphone. So there are like two major types of microphone that in the consumer people can buy. So the dynamic microphone is more of like what we use in the live setting
Mm-hmm.
or what we use in
We're using now.
karaoke. All right. Yeah. So if you have a microphone, if you're gonna purchase or invest in a microphone, so
Mm.
that's a really big factor. It eliminates a lot of issues with the audio. So because that's the tool that captures your mic. And actually right now I'm using just my laptop because I'm not in my studio or basically my office.
Mm.
But it's I try my best to, like earlier before the call, we were figuring out which one sounds better if I'm gonna use my AirPods or this setup.
Yeah,
So it's good to experiment as well with what you have, basically. But microphone, it's on at the top,
it's the
right?
top. Okay. Now, tell me, is the saying is more expensive best or like what's the kind of, and I suppose if we use US dollars, like what's the kind of price range maybe that people could be expect just to get get started in terms of podcasting?
So we can see actually good microphones, dynamic microphones around the $100 or even less. So that's the
Mm.
ballpark figure, $60 to $100. That should give you a decent, sound already. There are, of course, $1,000 microphone that you can pick. A lot of people are using it. That Hale PR40 is one of those. There's so many microphones that you can buy that are super expensive that would sound, amazing. But the thing is, you can start lean with just the the basic microphone of a dynamic, as long as it's a dynamic microphone. Although here's the thing, I'm not disregarding condensers at all. But if you have now the capacity to convert a room into like a studio where you have audio treatment, by audio treatment, I mean by, there's audio absorption basically that you can use like acoustic boards or panels that you can put out there, or it's just a room, that's not made of creep or it's really for studio recording. So having these sound panels or that absorbs the audio, then you can use condenser for all I care. You can use it as much as you like. But yeah, if
Yeah.
you're starting small, if you're just recording in your room or in a place where you can't control much of the environment, we can start with a dynamic microphone as a go-to.
I wish someone had given me that advice many, many years ago because I think over the years I spent thousands of dollars on microphones and I've come back to a Audio Technica microphone, which is, I think, if I look at US dollars, maybe, 80, $90
Yeah.
microphone. And it's kind of like, man, why did I waste all that money all those years ago? But hey, it's a trial and everything too, isn't it? So
Exactly. Yeah.
and that's probably one of the things you're not going to know until you really start what you want out of your microphone, what works well with your voice, and even just how you position it too, like on the
Mm.
table or with a boom arm and everything. So I think don't let any equipment be a barrier to entry. That'd be one of the things I would say is that it's just start with a microphone that's good enough. At the end of the day, get your content out there and you can always adjust your microphone over time, can't you?
100%. Yeah.
No, you mentioned before about like with the room set up and having acoustic boards and things like that. If I've just got like a a square room, let's just say it's like a holding cell, basically, but with one big window, um, which is kind of like what some bedrooms are maybe like. So is there a way or a technique of where I be facing the window or facing away from the window? Um, does that make an impact from a sound perspective?
So, with Windows, I would say that affects the lighting. So a lot more than, but the thing with sound, it's because it travels through space. And if, glass and concrete are pretty good conductors in a way, like they bounce off sound. That's
Mm.
why I'm in a worst case scenario. You can hear that I'm in an echoey room. So I'm in a hotel that has concrete industrial design. I'm actually putting some pillows just to absorb it a bit.
Ah.
But yeah, so you can have that. But ideally, if you're in that room, it's more about the like how sound bounces off. So that
Mm.
affects it. So the positioning, I would say that would affect in a way if you're facing, I think if I've to compare, don't take my word for it, but to compare concrete, wall compared to a window, I would go for a window in a way because it's not that bounce, if it's not going to bounce sound as much as in comparison to that. But overall, it's all about just you know, having this, if we can modify the space in a way that you're not too, uh, it's a lot of experimentation, right? There's so
Mm.
many factors involved. So, but if I would suggest that you check out like where, bring your setup in the room, just go around. I always suggest this with my clients, like even the setup of the recording gain, the mic volume, and all that. Just set it out, give some recordings, and we'll pick from, after listening to these number of audio, which one really works best, then we pick from there. So there's
Mm.
so many factors involved that I can't just pinpoint, okay, this one works. But yeah. So
That,
mostly if I would choose like glass over concrete to face it. And light is also better on your face. So
yeah,
it is.
yeah. It's like a big jigsaw, isn't it? All these little pieces, and you adjust the little levers to get the right thing. So, Pillow Fortress is a legitimate thing. You've heard it from Dave. And look, I think one of the other things that I notice is just like things that you don't think of in the room, like your chair, like making sure it doesn't squeak. Or
Mm,
if you've got someone who's potentially going to come in the door, like that
mm.
it doesn't squeak. Like get that WD-40 out, give it a good going over beforehand. Um, yeah, and look, that's where obviously the editor becomes your best friend at the end of the day because a lot of those things can be removed after.
Yeah,
Yeah.
remedied, but it's not 100%, right?
Mm.
That's no wonder why like studios, professional studios they have like on air or recording, uh, like you know,
Yeah.
tag on the door. So you might as well do that too. Like if you're recording a podcast, might as well like put something or lock the doors just to, make sure that no one's coming in, just, in the middle of the recording. So many things that you can use, like what a recording setup is, that would be, right? So in a recording room, most of them are carpeted or, they have rugs in it just to add to the absorption as well. Yeah, so that would help a
Yeah.
lot.
I think that's a good point. Like, I think often people go, oh, I've got to have a recording studio, and they think of what's in when you watch a radio show and it's like this square room. But having those soft furnishings and having rugs and furniture around, it's actually going to help. So don't feel like you've got to clear the room out and have it like just this designated lonely little cell just for podcasting.
Mm. Yeah.
Furniture is going to actually work in your favor.
Curtains, furnitures, as long as it's not bouncing off sound, that would be great. So that would add off to like making it sound right. So
Yeah, yeah.
the yeah, it's just the basic analogy of this is that you want to make sure that what is captured on the microphone is your voice, only your voice, right? So what happens if you're in a room where it bounces off, that is captured on the microphone, and that causes the issue. And that causes what we call reverb or echo. So yeah, like what I'm having now. This is a good example not to do it, but it's just because it's a bare room. It's more of like a bare room. It's in a big room too. So that bounces off the audio and it captures, and yeah, and that's where it comes in. Like it's
Yeah, and so
helping. Yeah.
tell us about the microphones and how the microphones can help play a part in that. And again, would you recommend that podcasters just use like AirPods or get a full headset? Like,
Yeah.
what's the deal there?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this dynamic mic. And what the good thing about these dynamic mics are, they're used in live settings just because they capture whatever is in front and not everything else. So you have to be very particular with the position of the microphone as well to make sure it's pretty close to your mouth, because if you're pretty far, then it won't capture your audio. So that's a good thing about dynamic mic, is it captures just a certain area around it or in front of it, and that's it. Everything else is like muted or at a very low volume captured. The thing with condenser or mics that have really high sensitivity is that they use an additional, like, a current or a voltage basically on the mic, so it uses electricity to bump up how it captures audio. So that, in just that analogy, it captures more audio. So it now captures the air condition, the dogs outside barking. So you really have an edge when you're using, if you're not in an optimal setup or an environment, then using a basically
Yeah,
dynamic mic. Yeah.
yeah, the
And
dynamic
phones, sorry.
and headphones. And don't do the rookie mistake that I did at the very start where I was plugging my headphones actually into the computer and not into the microphone. Because then when
Hmm.
I put the headphones in through the microphone, I was like, whoa, all of a sudden I could hear that I was clicking pens in the background, I was tapping my foot, and it wasn't getting picked up beforehand. So all those little things, again, it's a trial and error just to work out,
Yeah.
what's going to work for you. But even like listening back to your episodes afterwards, I know this sounds silly, but you just pick up like a lot of um not only like air cons and things in the background. If you really listen to it, you can hear all that stuff. But it also,
Yeah.
in terms of some of your speech, like you might have little sayings um that you use all the time. Now, you don't notice it because it's just the way you talk. But then when you're listening back to it, you go, oh my God, do I say that all the time? Like, so, yeah, making sure, do a few trial runs and go back and be really, get other people to even critique your podcast just on the quality side of things. I find really useful. Now, Dave, one of the things is podcasting has traditionally been the audio format, but we're seeing more and more people moving to having a visual element to their podcast as well. So I'm curious, how do you look good on camera? What are some tricks? Give me the hacks I need to know.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so many things you can apply, but I think if I would rank microphone for the audio, I would go for lighting for camera setup. So more than, the camera, I think we have decent cameras. I'm on a 720p right now on my laptop. So I do use an external DSLR if I'm doing a recording usually. So, but yeah, if you don't have that, I think lighting is the first thing I did here. Was I figure out, what are better lightings. I'm using this. I bounce it off of the wall just to give it like a better lighting on my end that gives you like a certain clarity. So your setup is pretty good. Pretty amazing. Yeah, it's shooting the light is,
Yeah, well,
and
I'm
it's
running a Canon EOS,
mm,
an external camera, and then yeah, a ring lights. Got some other lights. It gets pretty hot underneath, mind you, some of these lights, but it's a good setup. And look, you make a good point too. often with podcasting, you're on the run, like you're in a hotel room at the moment. So you've got to get creative and about how you find the right lighting and everything. So just grabbing the bedside lamp there, getting it in the right direction, doing a few trial and errors beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's about, having your face clear and, how you talk. And people, when watching podcasts, the thing with it's crazy because people use YouTube as a way to, that's from my experience. I'm not saying this is all everyone's doing this, but some people search podcasts through YouTube, or they landed on a podcast for YouTube, but they're not actually listening or watching it. I mean, most of the time they're just playing it or driving or using it as a player. Basically, it's crazy how people are doing that. But it's yeah, because YouTube are people are on YouTube, and most of the time they, for those especially locally,
Yeah.
don't who don't know that there are podcasts out there. They figure out, oh, that's a podcast, but they're on YouTube, so they use that as a player most of the time. And let's be honest, like no one's gonna look at your face the
The whole
time.
for a whole 1 hour session.
Yeah. Unless you're as good looking as are this kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Dave, another question I've got for you is it's all well and good. I might spend a fortune on getting the best room set up, getting sound quality and the visual elements all together. But when it comes to your guest kind of thing, like sometimes, and I know I've had podcasts where I go in and it's like you go, whoa, hang on a minute. Like their setup's obviously not going to be as established as, or may not be as established as yours.
Yeah.
But even things like, just getting them to get the camera so they can actually see their shot and it's not, from their nose up that you're seeing and things like that. Is there anything I can do to help prepare my guests who, may not be as confident coming on to a show and things like that, just to help them to get prepared?
Yeah. So uh I love checklists. It worked for most of my clients. They use checklists. So there are a lot of things you can do basically. So some of them even send microphones to their guests, which is crazy. But but basic checklists, like what are you having, like just be on a, if you don't have a microphone, just at least be on a laptop. Use a headphones, just because we don't want to, if you're using a laptop or any microphone, basically if you're using speakers, from a loud, if you're listening to someone through speakers, it will be captured to the microphone. And going back to the point earlier, we don't want to we want to make sure that the only sound comes in on the mic is your voice. So that's a big factor that really annoys not just the editors but the listeners as well, right? It's because at the end of the day, it's all about clarity. We want to make sure the message comes across. And if you're the audio quality is like the basic setup for most. So that's one thing. Another thing I would say is to, like, I would really try to avoid the phone thing. Some people record on the phone, which is crazy, and they just do it like that. So try as much as possible, like, you try to know a bit about their setup. If you have the resources, of course, if you have an assistant, you can like record prior or do a test recording, especially if it's a big guest that you can't do any re-recording in the future, or it's unlikely. So you want to, like, as much as possible, have a little bit, if you can't do it in a prior date, but on maybe 30 or 15 minutes ahead of time, just know the setup, figure it out, try to work with them. And that's
Yeah,
a big thing.
tweak it. Look, even we did that beforehand, didn't we? We
Exactly. Yeah.
check the sound quality, make sure it's good from both ends. So I think that's one of the things. Take your time. Um, you don't want to realize that the quality was bad at the very end when it gets to edit stage and you've lost all the
Yeah.
gold in terms of your content. But you made a really good point earlier about like using your phone. The other element that we probably haven't touched on, and it kind of almost this day and age with the whole COVID thing seems like a bit of relic from the past. But face-to-face interviews, like
Yeah.
what should we be using there as a way to record?
Yeah. So if my podcast that we did before is we actually record on in-house, or basically we go to live settings and we bring our microphones and we record it wherever the guest is. So it's a pretty fun, although a lot of things to do, like so many things to do, but it's fun to do it once in a while. So what we do is yes, we'll have we the setup. We have like this recorder that we can input, like a portable recorder. It's a Zoom H6 is what I had before, or right now that I have. So you can plug in like three microphones or four microphones in them, in that device, and you can just use a battery with it, or you have a plug with it, which you can just plug it on any outlet, and you can hit the record button. That's it. You can just record it with the microphone. So I have this mini bag that I carry and record that. But if you're doing there's lapels as well. You can record your I haven't personally tried it, but there are, I had in one recording that they have this device that records, lapel mics. So, but if we really have, on a but I think putting it on a live recording is really different, right? It's far, yeah,
Setup,
it's
yeah.
a different setup, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is with a lapel mic, I know we've had a couple of people that maybe at a conference or something, they've gone and said, okay, I'm going to interview these people. And typically at a conference, everyone's got these like lanyards on and they've got a lapel mic, but you can just hear like a lot of clanging and stuff like that in the background because of the lanyards. So yeah, if you have a lapel mic, make sure you attach it to your shirt or something and try and get people to take those lanyards off because
Mm.
from an editing perspective, they're our worst nightmare or one of our worst nightmares. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Dave, for someone who is serious about taking their studio quality to the next level, but don't really know how, what are three steps or maybe actions that you think that they should really, I suppose, assess or critique around their setup and maybe get someone like yourself who has experience to sit at the other end and critique them on? What are the three top areas that you think they should focus on?
Yeah, so I would say we start with like the whole vision of it. Like, are we doing this? Are you serious with this? And are you like, and what budget basically is the first question you should ask. If you have a budget in mind, that we can play around with that. Next thing is we have to invest really on equipment. So we've mentioned a couple here already, but yeah, microphones are great. And camera is a really good one too. So those are your two weapons and basically your equipments that you use for podcasting. Headphones, that's fine unless you're editing a podcast. You can just use any pairs of headphone basically when on recording. And then we have the room setup, which is another thing. Like if we have that dynamic microphone, that would help a lot with improving the sound quality. And just trying to treat the room as much as you could, have that no disturb room where you have the as much a pillow fortress or anything that absorbs the sound, and we can purchase the acoustic panels out there or you can create one like through there's so many YouTube videos about it where you can create through towels or egg trays that you can use. So those are uh, basically three, but I will add four, a
Okay.
fourth one. All right. So there's a big factor on how you record it. So that's a one thing. And we're using Zoom right now, but if you're open to it, maybe we can use another app called like there are a lot of apps by the way, but I have
What one's
I
your favorite?
yeah, so there are for videos we have Riverside.fm. So they have a way. So the thing with that is because no matter how good the setup is, but if you record on online basically on this conference call, so you will have to go through the app, which is what we're using now is Zoom. But there are actually other apps that allows us to record audio directly to the computer, and that's what they use to upload or to share to you as a host or the podcaster. And that's how you can work with, like, those are the files that you can work with. So the good thing with that, it eliminates, like, I should say, it improves the audio quality to about 70 to 80%. In a way, it eliminates all the other problems. Just because if you have a guest that doesn't have a good microphone, but at least the recordings will be how it would sound like through their device, how they record it on their device. So that's another thing. So there are apps like Riverside.fm, we got Squadcast, we got Zencaster, and there are a lot more. But yeah, those are the big ones that you can check it out. So you might want to try that out.
I would
So
love to get you on the show and to look at like what are all the different how do you choose your recording software, and that could be a whole nother discussion too, to kind of go through and the pros and cons of each as well. Because I think for a lot of people it can just be a little bit overwhelming. There's so many different options out there. But I agree, Riverside, the quality comes back really crisp and clear, which is
you're
great.
right.
So yeah. Hey Dave, I've really enjoyed having a chat with you today. Thank you so much for being on the show. Now, people want to learn more about you and podcast engineers. How do they reach out to you?
Yeah, sure. So our website is podcastengineers.com. And that's the best way to reach out. You can find the email there or contact form. But yeah, if you want to reach out social, I'm just Dave Visaya on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. So yeah,
Wonderful. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and insights. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome.